Hey everyone, this is Jim West, founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com. And boy, do I have another great guest. I've been on a roll this season. So if you've just now started watching, I recommend you go back to episode 1 of season 2 and catch up. But without further ado, I got an award-winning CISO, keynote speaker, and best-selling author, Ira Winkler. And Ira, if you want to add to that long list of accolades, you could go ahead and fill us in, fill in the blanks.
No, I also should say I'm the program director or whatever you call it for CruiseCon, which is a cyber security conference being held on a cruise ship in February. So just
Wow,
go
in
to
February. So what's the website for that? And just in case anyone
yeah,
watching this, I will put it in the description below. But what's the website?
it's easy, cruisecon.com. I
So
paid a lot of money for that website.
cruisecon.com.
Yeah.
What are some of the highlights of the cruise that you could share with us? Like what are some of the
So
things that are going to happen?
So I joke it's the flagship of cybersecurity because we actually have Admiral Rogers, the former director of NSA and the first director of or first commander of US Cybercom as our keynote speaker this year. We then have a
Nice.
bunch of people, former CTO from the CIA, former lawyer from NSA, got a bunch of CISOs who are friends of mine who are doing some talks regarding personal development, regarding professional development, regarding AI related issues, legal issues, human issues, and so on. It's a single track conference. And fundamentally, the way I came up with it, like part of my background, I used to be chief security architect at Walmart, chief security strategist at HP, and I got invited to a lot of, let's just say, A-list events. And all these events are awesome. They provide for some technical discussions, like I said, personal development discussions, and they're all in wonderful places. And the only catch is that you have to be like, an executive of a Fortune 200 company to get invited. And I decided I want to democratize this and make these like A+ list experiences available to the average person. So I went and I got the speakers who I've met over the years at these top events and brought them to a cruise ship, which I don't want to say you're locked together because it's a really large cruise ship, but at the same time, it provides for a lot of networking experiences. So, because fundamentally, when you go to like one of these really nice events, everybody thinks, okay, we're at a nice place and we're have really interesting topics. But fundamentally, the value comes out of the relationships you develop
The
at those
networking,
events,
yeah.
the networking. And you said you're here for like people just starting out. And if you're just starting out, networking is how you're going to get maybe your first job through your last job at the end of the day. So that's the experience I'm trying to create with CruiseCon.
Yes, so for one, I love cruising. So I have another YouTube channel where I
Mhm.
document my vacations and travels. But I lived on a boat for 4 months. So I was leaving the States, and I was in a kind of a transition period where it was still that time in COVID where we didn't know what Germany and Europe was going to do with opening up their COVID restrictions. But the cruise ships were selling out of Texas, and I just did back to back to back, and I did it for 4 months. So I lived on a ship for 4 months, loved it, had a suite. They took care of me. It's a floating resort. They have wonderful fitness facilities, spas. They got like 14, 15 bars and lounges and just so much activities to do. And I can only imagine having a conference on a floating resort. Because like you said,
Well,
most conferences, you go to a nice hotel or a nice convention center. They have like the booths and exhibitors and then you got the speakers. And usually, you mentioned this is a single track, so it really simplifies your agenda. But when you go to these conferences, you'll have like two, three, four, sometimes four tracks of all these speakers speaking at every hour, half hour. And it becomes one of those things like, well, I want to see these two people speak, but I can only be at one place at one time. And it becomes kind of, a whole like making these concessions and compromises on your time because there's so many treks. So I love that you have a floating resort for cruise con, and you
eh,
have just a single trek with all stacked with all these like former NSA directors and just powerhouse names on the agenda. So cruisecon.com, guys, check it out if you're interested. The link will be in the description below. But what I really
yeah, I
want
just well, just let me and I
to,
should say that this event is cheaper to attend than all of the other major events that are out there.
Uh-huh.
People could literally get on CruiseCon. Well, right now, I guess it's $1,500. So people could get on CruiseCon for $1,500, which is less than you'd pay for a ticket alone on, at ISC Squared, Security Congress, InfoSec World, all the like.
So
So
I,
anyway.
I I could I can attest those events are very, very pricey. Do you have any more details about CruiseCon? Is it just one day or is it how many days and
No,
then
it's a
stop?
5 day cruise. You're
5
literally going
days.
on you're going
You
on
got
a 5 day cruise. We leave guess it's Port Canaveral out of Orlando area.
yes.
First is a day at sea, so we hold the conference day at sea. Then we go to Cozumel on the second day, spend
Nice.
the time in Cozumel. We're going to try to get a group excursion together to see the pyramids. Then we have another day at sea, heading towards the Bahamas, where we're going to have a second day of CruiseCon, and then we're in the Bahamas for the last day of the cruise, and then back the following day. So
Nice.
anyway,
So
that is
you get the Mexican Riviera with Cozumel, and you get the Bahamas, and you got these days of sea single tracks where you don't have to make compromises on who you see speak. I
Mhm.
love it. Love the fact that you got the agenda done right, and of course it's a floating resort. So you got, if you're done with the conference for the day, you go schedule a massage. You can go. There's specialty dining options. I already love this, and of course the real value that you can't, you can put the value on how much you're going to pay for a ticket. That's quantitative, but the qualitative value, which is exponentially worth more than the price of admission, is the connections you're going to make on the boat, because you're going to be able to have those sessions where after the person's done speaking, they're right there sitting at karaoke at night. And you can just chit chat all evening with a former director of the NSA or another powerful organization in security. And then you can be like, hey, I'm new. I'm trying to, get to the next level of my career. So you got mentorship, networking, mentorship possibilities, and best case scenario, the next opportunity in your career could appear just by rubbing shoulders with
Mhm.
all these folks that are on a boat with you. So I love it. I love the concept, love the idea. So how many years has CruiseCon been active?
This is the first one, and
So first one.
the
So
first
do
one.
you want to be able to say that you was there? You was first one at the first cruise con. There's your bragging rights. So
Mhm.
Ira, you're also a best-selling author, and there's like I think 7, 8 publications to your name, but I just want to talk really about the more recent ones since like 2000,
Mhm.
2020, because there's some interesting titles. So I'm just gonna call out these titles because I think they're all related in what you're trying to fight with. You're trying to
Mhm.
solve a problem in industry. And a lot of folks that are already cyber professionals, I know you're going to start giggling and laughing because you're either going to laugh or you're going to cry. You're going to laugh because it's funny, cry because it's true. But here's the titles, okay? So one title is called Security Awareness for Dummies. Another one is called Cybersecurity All in One for Dummies. And then we got one called You Can Stop Stupid. So, Ira, if you would just kind of give us a brief summary of what each book is trying to address and the problem it's trying to solve, and we'll go from there.
So let me go. The oldest book first is You Can Stop Stupid, of the three that you mentioned. And basically, the concept is that when somebody clicks on a phishing message, somebody does something unwise, I'll just say unwise for now. Um, People say, oh, stupid user, they just need to be more aware. And I'm sitting there like, who's the stupid one? The person who clicked on a link, or the person who allowed a single click to ruin your entire network? So stupid is not the users. Stupid is actually, for lack of a better term, the developers and the like, and the admins who create an environment that allows a single issue to create a major problem. Because, we look at other disciplines like accounting, like safety science, and other ones, because in cybersecurity, we act like we're this little snowflake that has completely unique problems like human error. Every other profession that's out there has dealt with human error and incorporates that into their processes. So, for example, accounting is pretty much saying, hey, I need to make sure people, I'm oversimplifying it, people enter data in the specific boxes in the right numbers and enter them accurately, and all the math comes up and stuff. But they also say, hey, you know what? Somebody's going to make a mistake. So we need to audit on a regular basis. We need to say, hey, wait a second. there will be mistakes made. Some of those mistakes are going to be because people made a mistake. Some of those are going to be because the person is malicious and is trying to steal money or cause us harm. So either way, they take all these processes and thoughts into account to create a comprehensive end-to-end system that builds in resiliency for human actions. Same thing with safety science. Safety science, where fundamentally what I'm doing is I'm adopting safety science to cybersecurity, because in safety science, if somebody gets injured, for example, falling off a ladder, I'm just using that as an example,
Hmm.
a good safety science expert says, hey, wait a second. Number one, why was that person on a ladder? Maybe that person didn't need to be on a ladder. Maybe, for example, I can take what they were climbing up for and put them to, put the goods on lower levels. So, for example, if I know that there's common things, I'm going to make sure the heavy stuff is not on top, it's on the bottom. I'm going to make sure the more common things that they're going to go for is on the bottom, and so on. And that's how they think in safety science. In
Wow.
other, so anyway, and then they account for, well, yes, even despite that, somebody might need to go up on a ladder and they might fall. I'm going to give them better guidance. But even if they do fall, I'm going to potentially mitigate harm by making people who climb up a ladder wear a harness so they can only fall and injure themselves so much.
Mhm.
And that's the type of thought processes that we need, because if a person, taking the concept further, if a person clicks on a phishing message, in the first place, why did the message get to the user? Number one, because somebody didn't turn on DMARC, which allowed fake email addresses to get through. Then it went to a secure email gateway. The secure email gateway somehow failed to filter out the message. Then once it went from the secure email gateway, it ended up on the endpoint. And on the endpoint, there you either have the spam box or the inbox to give the user a little bit of a hint. Likewise, maybe they're going to add a tag that says this is an external message, not an internal message, to help display potential issues. And then you can guide the user. And frankly, you could even say, hey, you just clicked to open that message. That would be a really dumb thing to do. Do you still want to do that? And the user says, yeah, I hate my company. I'm hoping this will cause harm. And then it's like, okay, you click, but then it's sort of like, well, if I have data leak prevention, if I have web content filters, I have anti-malware, I have an user environment that doesn't allow the user to access sensitive materials or doesn't allow the user to download and install malware because they're not given permission to do so, all of this will potentially mitigate harm. And yes, a user might click because they're stupid. A user might click because they're overworked. A user might click because they're malicious. A user might click because the system is lagging and the cursor on the screen is not where the system thinks it
That can
is.
happen. Yeah.
And so they open it up instead of delete or mark it spam. And either way, the system accounts for, I don't care why. I just know that things happen and we're proactively mitigating our damage. But anybody who says a user's stupid for clicking on an email message, I would argue, hey, who's the stupid one for putting that message in the user's inbox in the first place?
So I
But
think
that's security. Yeah.
I think Obi-Wan had said in the first Star Wars, I think it was, who is the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him? And I love that you brought up a great perspective. Is because that's what we get in our fishing training. Like one link can take down the whole organization. It's the doomsday, right? It's like you click that link and it sinks the whole operation. And you're right. The flip side of that is, why is the whole operation all dependent upon me not clicking a link in an email? And that's a great perspective to challenge the security plans. And this ties directly into what I would call layered
Mhm.
defense or defense in depth, because if your immediate, right to root level access button is a click away, then you got some bigger problems than that. There's some other big
Well,
problems.
here's the problem. When we look at, I mean, in many cases, people implement strategies for other aspects of cybersecurity. When it comes to the human, they think of it as a tactic. They think of, oh, I just need a more aware user. A more aware user is a tactic, it's not a strategy. So, what I'm doing is proposing a strategy because that ties to the next issue, which was my book, Security Awareness for Dummies. And even though I might sound like I'm downplaying the importance of security awareness, I'm not downplaying it. Security awareness is a very valuable tactic. And my book, Security Awareness for Dummies, is obviously a For Dummies series book, a real For Dummies book, which was one of my goals in life.
I love
And
it.
what happened was, yeah, this is a book on how to do security awareness right. And one of the fallacies in security awareness, when you look at most security awareness videos and training, all of them are like, I call it training people to be Elmer Fuds. And what I mean by that is they're always on the lookout for the wascally wabbit. In other words, they're always on the lookout. Is this from a hacker or this whatever? And I'm like sitting there, it's like, no, you're training people to be afraid of an entity. But what you should be training people to do is how do they do their job right? And so you don't have to go ahead and say, well, this email message from a hacker. You should be looking at an email message and saying, what is the right thing for me to do with this email message? Not, is this message from a hacker? And if it's not from a hacker, it's okay, because it just very well might not be. You look at it saying this is a request for information, and this request for information should not be going to me. It should be going to not nowhere near me. I'm going to forward this to my supervisor. I don't care if it's a hacker. I don't care if it's really the CEO. This is not this information they're asking for me to release, as an example, is not something I should be releasing, period. And that's, you know, that's what people should be trained to do. And that's just one example on a part of a good security awareness program.
Mhm.
And then what happened was the For Dummies people, they wanted to create a book called Cybersecurity All-in-One for Dummies. So they took some chapters out of Security Awareness for
Makes
Dummies,
sense.
Cybersecurity for Dummies, and Hacking for Dummies, and made an all-in-one book.
Wow. So
It's
you're
not the
getting a
whole
lot of
security.
different sources and books into one. So I love that. Um,
Yeah.
I think that Ira, you talk about a very important thing where we're usually beating up the users, and the users got an annual awareness training or quarterly training, or a new systems come out, so they're just training, 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 and at the same time being held accountable to perform tasks and make these metrics, and having that kind of fear put upon the user community that, oh man, if I do the wrong thing, I could be liable for taking down the whole company, lose my job, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems to be focused a lot of on negativity, like consequences, repercussions, and so forth. And but also the enemy, if you will, or the bad malicious actors out there have gotten so much more sophisticated now with the advent of AI. They can create a exact replica of like bankofamerica.com in an instant, right? So you can just put in the site, get a looks spot on exact lookalike. Maybe instead of Bank of America, they got three A's at the end, and no one's paying attention to URL because most people read headlines and do it
Mm-hmm.
quickly. So they'll see a bank of something, and then they'll see the logos, they'll see the same page they're used to seeing, and they put in their login and they do the things that next thing you know, they're compromised. They might have already loaded some malware, like, oh, you need to download this to be able to see your account information, and they've
Mm-hmm.
executed it. You're right. There should be things in the background that should be protected, like endpoint security system of some type, some kind of CM event monitor. And there's several other tools and approaches you could
Mm-hmm.
do with endpoint security, not to go down that rabbit hole. But
Right.
the thing is that with AI, they're able to mimic everything down to a phone call. With deep fakes and so forth, someone can mimic someone's voice that can sound like the CEO of the company, and you're like, oh my goodness, I got it, sir. Here, and but you're right, they don't take that moment to think like, why would the CEO of a company be calling me? Like who,
Mm-hmm.
little old me on the network, or why would? And then I think the training has to focus more and adapt, right? Because we're still doing the same tired training where it has to adapt to current threats, right? And the new hotness is, like I said, deep fake websites, deep fake voices and video, and all this content that you can't trust because there's almost virtually no way today to verify and authenticate what you're looking at, right? Some businesses may sell
Yeah.
at what I call an 80% solution, but at the end of the day, what is the 100% solution? So Ira, my question to you, with all that being said, what would be the number one thing you would advise companies and people that are trying to figure out and navigate this new AI world where AI is exponentially enhancing the ability to do phishing attacks or do different types of masquerading?
So this comes down to, at the moment, let's say it's going to be a fairly rare case. It's going to be for very, very extreme things. That's not to say there's a lot of what I guess it's called grandma fraud, where people are calling up saying, "Hey, grandma, I've been kidnapped. I need $50,000." That unfortunately happens.
Mhm.
Um, but what people need to do, at least in a business environment, I can't control grandma. But what people need to do is say, look, this is now a reality. And this means I need to establish processes in my company that account for this,
Mhm.
that say, hey, even if the CFO says make a $25 million transaction, which actually did happen in Asia, as an example,
Mm.
even if that happens, I need to say, okay, well, this is the reality that somebody will do a video deep fake of the CFO asking some analyst somewhere to transfer money. I would be like, okay, well, this is a reality. Now we're going to implement multiple verification, that even if there is a video that says transfer the money, that person should pick up the phone of the known phone number of that CFO and call up and verify while they're on the phone with that person.
Mhm.
And
I
so,
like
like
that.
I said, don't be afraid, but here now these are the processes. Processes are in place for a reason. We're not just here to be jerks. So I'm trying not to curse. We are here to save, we're here to balance risk. And
Yeah.
I also do want to say that the first time that happened, I will give a congratulations to the criminal for doing something new and unique. However, because security is not about perfection. Security is about risk management, and people need to understand that there will always be risk. I cannot account for every time Bugs Bunny puts on a dress differently,
Yes.
as an example. But I go ahead, I learn. Unfortunately, there will be costs. Even if I have processes in place, there might be violations, even for good reasons, and I have to accept that. But without giving me infinite money, that's it. But now that we do know deep fakes happen with voices, deep fakes happen with videos, we now need to add additional verifications that say, hey, guess what? I am going to contact that person through a secondary mechanism, even if they appear to be on the phone with me right now.
I
And
like it.
I am going to initiate the communication through a communication channel that is legitimate, such as, hey, maybe if they use Microsoft Teams, I'm going to get on Teams and give them a call, and they should be happy that I'm calling them up to verify this. If somebody
Yep.
says, I need you to do this now, it's like, wait a second, I have the CEO in
Urgency.
Teams. I'm going to call you up and I will finish the transaction if you answer that phone right now.
Yeah. I like it. So it's
Or,
kind of like a two-factor authentication, but for people, I'm just going to
right.
go ahead and do another level of authentication, making sure that this request is legitimate and it really is you. So I like that.
Oh, hold on a second. This is embarrassing, but for some reason, I think my dog unplugged my
No
power.
worries. I'm gonna hit the pause.
Uh,
Okay, everyone, we're back. Had a pet issue, so had to take care of it, but we're back now. So Ira, you've given us some great insights and perspectives and kind of changing the way we should approach and look at security awareness, especially particularly for end users. But for the managers, cybersecurity managers, directors, any kind of executive level people that could possibly be watching this podcast in the future, what's something from I know you got like 8 publications, but out of all the publications, what would be if you had to recommend one? To anyone from management level one all the way to the C-suite, what would that book be?
so I would have to recommend two. Sorry about that.
No worries.
But the first would be You Can't Stop Stupid, because frankly, there's a lot of fundamental principles embedded within the book. And on top of that, the human aspect is critical. Another one I don't get money for yet at the moment is Spies Among Us, which is a book I wrote in 2005, which is fairly iconic. Some of the examples might be out of date, but the fundamental principles are still there. And people told me they have a career in cybersecurity because they read that book.
Nice.
So
I
those are
love
the
it.
two I would say are fundamentally must reads.
I want to add something for those of you that are getting to know Ira right now. What he just said right there. that he's not even being paid for it anymore, but he still felt, because this is where ethics and morals and integrity comes through, where he's like, this is going to help people, and it has helped people. And I can identify with that. When you help shape someone's trajectory in their career, set them on a better path in life and career, and overall, you're helping the overall industry become more secure, because there's another person
Mhm.
that has a better perspective, better vision to see problems and to take carry on in their career, and possibly pass it forward to other colleagues and coworkers and improve those environments. So I love that exponential effect, and the fact that you said, hey, I'm not making any more money about it, but I have to talk about it. That speaks alone to Ira's integrity and character, and I love that about him. And when he says that he's helped a lot of people get into the cybersecurity, that's something I'm very passionate about. With that being said, Ira, I know you've had a long career with a lot of hats you've worn. Is there any like lessons along your career? Or actually, before I get to that question, actually, there's the first question.
Mhm.
Everybody's going to want to know this, but if we was to get in a time machine right now and go back to day one when a young Ira said, I want to do IT cyber, what is that story? Could you share your story of day one?
So my first job was NSA, and people could argue
What a great
theoretically
start.
that was, I mean, so what happened was, and this is a true story, like I was a psychology major. I wanted to be an astronaut, a veterinarian, or a spy. Everything fell through.
Clandestine
And
services wasn't calling yet.
yeah, and then what happened was I took some tests randomly, that and this was at a time where nobody knew what NSA was. I took some tests randomly and I did really well. And luckily, I did so well that they wanted me. And when I was interviewed by them, they're like, wow, you have really good computer aptitude. How about a computer internship where we'll train you to be in computers? I'm like, I hate computers. I want nothing to do with them. They're like, oh, what about cryptanalysis where you make do puzzles all I go, I'm not looking at ones and zeros all day. And then I took a job as an intelligence analyst where you were, intelligence in the intel analyst basically look at incoming data, write reports based on the data and so on. And I was in the working for the National Signals Intelligence Operations Center, which is essentially the nerve center for NSA. And God, I hated that job and thought I couldn't hate computers any more than I hated that job.
Yeah.
I got into my computer internship and I did a bunch of different. My first job was ironically programming supercomputers to do cryptanalysis, which is ironic given how much I hated computers and didn't want to do cryptanalysis. But over time, I did variety of different things, got a little bit of travel in, not as much as I would have hoped. And then I ended up going to government contractors. And one day somebody said, instead of going to the Pentagon, can you make a few phone calls? And it turned out they wanted a social engineering attack because my company at the time was saying, hey, we want to get into the commercial world. So cybersecurity is our way in, because that's at the time what was new and commercial companies didn't have much going. So this was the thought. So anyway, I ended up taking over a bank, and that was kind of really, really fun. Then my next thing, somehow I stumbled into doing an investigation of the Citibank break-in. If you research Vladimir Levin in 1994 Citibank hack, I was one of the lead investigators on that by a complete fluke, and God, I loved it. And that was but I mean, I took over a bank and I wrote a paper I wrote a paper because my company had a policy. If you had a paper accepted at a professional event, they have to send you. And I just randomly sent in a paper to this conference. And then all of a sudden was called the seminal work in social engineering. And I joke, I had to look up what seminal meant and what social engineering meant.
I love that. Is that paper still available somewhere online that someone can read?
It was the 1995 Usenix Security Conference.
Usenix, you went way back with that.
Yeah, and that was like one of the preeminent technical
Yes, it was.
cybersecurity events.
If you do
So
happen to find the link, Ira, please message it to me. I will definitely put it in the description below, because I think it'd be something even today to read. Because again, you're just offering us just wonderful insights and perspectives. One of the things I wanted to ask though, during your great career and all these different organizations you supported and different activities you've done, you've had to have some great coaches or mentors along the way. Is there any people you'd like to acknowledge that's kind of gave you, broader perspectives or help maybe guide you along your way?
So let's see. I'd say one of the people was I'm terrible with names, but I remember Dan Ryan. I credit him in my first book, Corporate Espionage. He worked with me at SAIC and fundamentally broke down the whole concept of risk versus of security, and that was foundational for me fundamentally. I would say likewise, my doctoral program, I still ready to want to finish, but this is going on 30 years now. But
Lifelong pursuit.
I will get this. But anyway, so the whole program, people like Jack Stott, who I think unfortunately is dead, but now, but he came up with a it's like he showed me or helped identify the problem is not computers that have value, but it's the information and services that are provided by the computer that has value. That's the whole outdated concept now of information resource management, which is, I wish people would learn that. That's why we have a CIO and people forget why a CIO exists. So, I mean, those are a couple of things. Then fundamentally, would I say there's one person more important than the other? I would say just a lot of good friends, throughout my career that helped me get the right work. I sometimes want to joke that the managers who are the most despicable people I ever met, I should credit them because they forced me to go into directions I would have never gone in because I just want to get the hell away from those assholes. So
I
anyway,
hear it. Well, that's a good point. Forcing you outside of your comfort zone, even if it's by an asshole boss, sometimes is a good thing. When people, have to take, go into those zones where they're not as comfortable. But that's where growth can happen, right? And that's where the good stuff, on the other side of that can happen. Um, I love, thank you for sharing that story. And with that being said, thanks for also sharing some of the people that have mentored you. Someone that's watching this right now, and I address this a lot with, my mission is to, close the cybersecurity skills gap. And I try to get people that are kind of on the fence, kind of looking at cyber like they hear about it. They hear there's always openings and jobs, and they hear about, six-figure salaries and all the other benefits that come through doing the work we do in cyber. But they see people like me and you, and they're like, oh, they're level 99. They're at top of Mount Everest. I'm not even going to be able to get just to the summit. That's not, I can't do it. I'm not technically minded. I'm not a computer guru. What would you say to that person that's watching right now that's thinking those kind of thoughts?
so sorry if you can hear my dog. He's just
Oh,
one
no
of the
worries.
dumbest border collies ever. But let's see. So what I would say is fundamentally right now, the whole like billions of job openings, that's complete bullshit. So that's you need to learn that. First thing I recommend people do is get jobs in what I call cybersecurity adjacent positions. And because frankly, why am I in cybersecurity? It's like I told you, the fact I was at NSA and programming means nothing now, but I was programming a Cray to do cryptanalysis. But, I mean, that sounds, but really, I was just programming. Then I had other jobs that were kind of cybersecurity related where I was doing project management. Then, I mean, those were critical, like making sure, like monitoring the money, making sure people stay on schedule, keeping things going. And so, what I recommend is like the best people I know in cybersecurity are not somebody who went ahead and like got a cybersecurity degree and the cybersecurity fairy came up over and said, Bing, you're now a cybersecurity expert. These are people who basically went out and had an esteemed career doing a lot of things.
Hmm.
And the fact they transitioned into cybersecurity, it makes them more valuable to me. And what I mean by that is, because you can't secure a system that you don't fundamentally understand. And a lot of cybersecurity degrees, and in all honesty, where there are people who cybersecurity jobs that are open, but those are for people with hands-on technical skills. You need to get that out of the way, and that needs to be accepted. On the other hand, if you want to go into like a non-technical position because you don't have a degree, you still need background because people are like, I hear people saying, oh, you don't need a, you should just think cybersecurity is cool as long as you spell it K3W1, and then, you will be 3133A or whatever it is. You know, that's not really what cybersecurity is. If you want to get a job, you need to develop outside skills. I mentioned project management. Knowing how to write well is even critical for people with technical skills, because people do like pen testing and they want to be a hacker. Even if they know how to do that, they need to write reports that make their results actionable, and you
Yes.
can't skip that. But, project management, you could take classes in project management. You want to learn about security awareness, you can do security awareness and everything like that. But are you going to learn anything? Are you going to learn about behavioral science? Are you going to learn how to develop courseware and things like that? And too many people don't think that even if it's a non-technical position, there still are relevant skills to learn. So if you want to get in there and you say, well, I don't know how to program, in the first place, you're willfully ignorant if you don't teach yourself to program. I used to program day in and day out. I did not have a cybersecurity degree. I had to teach myself. You can download Python for free. I know finance majors in college that want to learn to program because it makes their job easier. If you are in a cybersecurity or any computer related position, even if you're not technical, there's no excuse for being willfully ignorant and not doing the basics. Because even, for example, security awareness, knowing how to program Microsoft Excel is critical to doing the job well, or at least making your life infinitely easier.
And you
And
bring up a good
people,
point, like Excel. If you open yourself up just learning VBA scripting, you could take Excel and put it on steroids really, really fast, and just it takes maybe 1 hour, 2 hours of just digging into it, just going down the path just a little bit, and then a whole new world will open up for you by just taking the initiative and just going a little bit beyond the surface. One of the things you had mentioned about a lot of folks in cybersecurity, it's kind of like politics, right? In the United States back in the day, a person running for president was either like a lawyer, a doctor, or a scientist, right? We used to have people that came from a long, distinguished career doing something, and then they decided to become a statesman and the person for the people, working
Mhm.
in public service. And but nowadays, politicians are just bred from the ground up. They were like class president in high school, and they just did public service all the way through. It's its own career path now, and it's kind of like, but they've maybe lost touch into what the pursuit of being a doctor is, and helping people as a doctor, or helping people as a lawyer with litigation side, or science, advancing the fields of science, and having this distinguished other career, like you said, cyber adjacent. I love that perspective. Like, people should also think about having, or if you're already in a career path, you can pick up a little bit of cyber. You can learn Python. You can learn, security operations, or you can endpoint security. You can learn more of the technical stuff. There's a plethora of resources. If you just Google free training in cyber, you're going to get 1,001 sites. But you could check Reddit forums. You could check other message boards where people will make recommendations of what some of the better or the cream of the crop is. Kind of like techno
Mhm.
music. There's millions of techno songs out there, but only a handful of them that are worth listening to. And so you can, and that's where it comes back to the human factor that Ira talked about earlier. The networking factor will save you time. Because let's say right now you stop listening to this podcast and you just Googled free cybersecurity training, and you start going down these pathways that may end up wasting money and time, because eventually a lot of these
Mhm.
programs are going to want money for the inside, the path, for the special nugget of information that only they have, and you got to pay a monthly subscription or a fee to get, and then you're wasting time and money going down the wrong path. And so that networking element that Ira mentioned earlier, like with CruiseCon, when you do an event like that and go to conferences, events, and start meeting other people that have been there, done that, they can give you that guidance, or to say, hey, check out this YouTube channel, or check out this guy's website. It's going to save you so much time. And that's the value. When I talked earlier about the human networking is exponentially more valuable in your entire career than just anything that you could do by yourself. And so I love that Ira
Mhm.
brought that up earlier, and we're able to kind of come full circle to that. So, Ira, this is a point of the podcast. I like to have my guests kind of go through what I call a few couple of questions that are speed round
Mm,
questions. There's no right or wrong answer, but we do this just to have a little bit of levity because we've been talking cyber, talking awareness, and don't get me wrong, you've been offering just diamonds of insight and information for us. So, I
mhm.
thank you so much for this. But this is where we kind of do something a little bit fun. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So, first question, and no right or wrong answer, just answer as quickly as possible. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
Star Trek. Oh, okay. Cake or pie?
Depends what type of cake
Oh,
and what type of pie. I'm not gonna.
so
Mm-mm.
what would be the preferred cake and the preferred pie?
I love Carvel ice cream cake with the crunchies in the middle, always a winner. But then if you
Nice.
have a good pie, a really, really nice pecan pie, for example, or
Okay.
key lime pie, when you're wanting that pie,
So
it's
like a
awesome.
pralines and cream is the ice cream, right? And then having a pecan pie. Okay. Next question, and this is one that gets a lot of people. So is a hot dog a sandwich?
Hell no.
I love it immediately. Hell no. Good man. What has been either some of your favorite books you've read in your life so far, or the most recent book you read that you're willing to share with us?
God, I don't think I've finished a book recently that I've read. I mean, I just start like I like if I show you, there's like 15 books on my counter right now. But I think iconic books that I've read include, for example, God, this is a case where you want to go ahead and, it's more the message, not the messenger, but these days. But you got Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Cash Flow Quadrant for those people who have any interest in business. Some of Tony Robbins' books. If you got Jim Rohn's books, even better. Fundamental, critical things. Um, book called Applied Behavioral Science. I can't remember the guy who wrote it, but a book, Applied Behavioral Science was really, really instrumental for me in how I look at the human aspects of cybersecurity. Um, God, which other books are there? Uh, sorry, I'm at a loss,
No,
but
that's
those are just a
okay.
few
You've
examples.
provided so many great authors there, and if you don't mind, Ira, just send me the links to the books from Amazon, and I'll do a whole book section with all the links that you've mentioned of different books. But
Mhm.
man, those are some big names. I mean, Tony Robbins, Rohn, all these guys, they're juggernauts. And what a lot of these things, what people don't realize is that it's just like watching a podcast episode. You're like, hopefully, we're adjusting your perception or your perspective and giving you an insight. An insight is that all those years of experience, we're giving you kind of a mental shortcut. And what guys like Tony Robbins does, it taps into what we're all capable of such great things. Like our brains are just, they can be limitless if we only learn how to tap into it through whether it's through an insight perspective or a strategy or way of thinking. And that's what it's trying to do is change your way of thinking and visualizing things. If a person is always like Tony Robbins is a big factor of like if you constantly think negative things, then your brain is only going to be seeking out the negative things. It's very similar to the phenomenon as once you buy a car, you're driving down the road, you start seeing every car that's like yours. Like back in 2021, I bought a Corvette
Mhm.
C8. And before, I never really noticed them. Every now and then, I would notice a Corvette because it was a new hot car. But until I had it, I didn't realize I was driving into Woodlands, Texas, and I'm like, I might have counted 20 plus Corvette C8s in a day, and it didn't make my car feel special anymore. I was like, oh my God, it's like everybody's got one. But it's like the same thing. There's another person that's similar to Tony Robbins that talks about, look for the color red. And then when they look for the color red, they said, well, how many things in the room were blue? And of course, they were only looking for the red. So it reinforces that idea that your thoughts change your perspective and how you see the world. And so these books that you're mentioning are powerful tools to kind of reinforce these things in you to see things differently so that you could use that perspective to your advantage. So I love all these books you mentioned. Great ones there. So thank you, Ira, for
Mhm.
sharing that one. So Ira, besides CruiseCon, are there any other like nonprofits you support, volunteer efforts you do, things that are maybe outside of day job, right?
So, well, things outside a day job. I mean, I should say I'm a master scuba diver trainer, and mostly I haven't really actively trained. I've never really actively trained people per se. I just showed up for my scuba school and then, took people out on certification dives. But frankly, things along the lines of protecting the environment, really like, focus on. Um, I'm not involved in this. I just donate money to, pet shelters and things like that. But otherwise, I mean, mostly like how I spend my time, and hopefully it has an impact, is really just trying to contribute to the community, putting out information and so on. And I mean, that's how I gain well, God, it's Tony Robbins principle, but there's a concept of your six basic, needs, which are connection, contribution, growth, and things like that. And for me, I get that primarily from cybersecurity and presenting at conferences, including nonprofits. I do like to be paid if I do give an event that's for a for-profit organization, but at the same time, I always try to go ahead and speak for free at community events like ISSA meetings, B-sides, things like that, where they're not paying or compensating speakers in general.
Okay. Back to your diving, what depth? Because I think that you get certified to certain depths, right?
Yeah, so recreational dive, I mean, I've been down to 130 feet, maybe 131 or so. That is the lowest any recreational diver should ever go without being what's known as a tech diver, where you start to go ahead because then you have to worry about decompression, illnesses, and things
Mhm.
like that. And if you go down too deep, your body keeps absorbing lots and lots of nitrogen, and then you come up with bends and stuff like that. But generally, I mean, there are things that, and this is true in cybersecurity, and I'm going to give this analogy. Everybody think, oh, how low do you go? Like, that's really cool. You know what? You know where I prefer to dive? Like 30 to 70 feet
Reefs. Oh,
typically, because that's where all the life is. And, usually, because you go down, maybe a reef's at 15 feet, whatever, but that's where you got a lot of light. That's where you have a lot of fish. That's where you have a lot of coral. Maybe you go down a little bit lower and it's still there, but you go down below 80 feet, towards you're dealing with sand. There's nothing good there. Maybe every so often there's a wreck, a little bit of coral or something, but most of the light is there, and it's a lot light. And I use that as a good analogy for cybersecurity because everybody wants to be like a hacker. Being a hacker is cool and stuff. I'll tell you one thing, running, having been at Walmart, having been at HP, having been in NSA and stuff like that, running a cybersecurity program is infinitely more difficult than hacking a cybersecurity program. You want to go into an easy job, go into hacking. You want to
mhm.
go into a hard job, go into protecting your organization from hackers where you have limitations such as funding, such as time, such as political concerns, such as human resources concerns, such as whatever it is.
Mhm.
That is infinitely harder than figuring out the one way in to hack a system.
I
Figuring
love
out how
that.
to fundamentally
There's
secure
where the
it is.
challenge is, right? There's where you got to rise up your skill set and level up to another level because it's just like criticism is the same way. Like you produce a book and you can have thousands of people that will criticize your work, right? But then the real thing is building the work itself. Like you said, shaping the programs and standing at the programs, knowing that you're, like you said, limited funds, limited resources, limited personnel. It's like playing chess with nothing but all pawns and knights, right? And the other side has all the pieces at their disposal, and you're just playing with pawns and knights. And God help you. So,
Well, just remember, and it's kind of another analogy. I think it is. Is it a Winston Churchill statement about the people in the stadium, where it's like the people in it's like the athlete, the person in on the field who is subject to criticism, who's the one who puts out, while the people who sit meekly in the stands are can say whatever as at their leisure.
yep.
You know, However, I do want to say maybe every so often you step back and look at the criticism and see if it's valid.
Yes.
Because too many people, it's like, God, the acolyte. You talk about Star Wars versus Star Trek, but the acolyte, God, was that horrible? But then there, you're a racist or misogynist if you don't like it. It's like, no, that show sucked by
Yes.
any account. And, so they need to step back and say, hey, maybe there's a reason that we have the lowest ratings for any Star Wars series ever. You got to start looking at, so sit back. And frankly, even when I get, when I speak at an audience, I'll speak in front of 100 people, you know, 90 people love me, 7 people think I'm okay, 3% will hate the air I breathe. And maybe those 3% have a point, and
Mhm.
maybe I could tweak what I do. But
Yeah.
the thing is, you don't necessarily want to go overboard and say, well, they said you did this and they didn't like that. Okay, well, now I'm going to address that. Then you lose the other 97 people who loved you or at
Yeah.
least thought you were okay. So you got to, however, maybe there's a good point that you need to learn from those people. So you look at it and consider it in kind.
I usually tell people, because I also mentor other people that are writing their first book or book series, because, I have over 100 publications. And one of the things I tell people as an author, you get to create, this is more so for fictional writing, but as an author, you get to create the world, you get to basically deliver your story to the public. And there's going to be people that don't get it, and the book's not for them. I always tell them, like, your book's going to find its audience, is going to find the people that see the same thing that's in your head, right? That's kind of what the difficulty of being a fictional writer is, taking what your vision in your head and putting it to paper, right? That's a hard process. Whereas people that are reading are taking the words and trying to imagine what they're reading, right? That same phenomenon like Lord of the Rings. I used to watch, I used to read J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings like every other year growing up in
Mhm.
a school, going through, elementary, junior high, and high school. I used to read like almost every year, every other year. But once the movies came out, the Peter Jackson films, I can't remember what I imagined Frodo looked like, what I imagined Gandalf looked like, Strider. These characters are forever supplanted in my memory because of the films. And so we lose that magic in a way of reading and imagining in our own worlds. And so, yeah, I say criticism, but back to the point of criticism, you're right, absolutely right, Ira. You should at least analyze the criticism. So, what is the thing that I can take from this and maybe grow myself, or maybe not repeat a mistake, or because sometimes you might find a mistake. We're not perfect. We're human. To err is human. To really mess things up requires a computer. But there can
Yeah.
be mistakes, and we should always be open to at least taking the criticism that can benefit us and help us grow. So I really like that. Ira, thank you for your time, because you've given us so much in this podcast. But before I let you go, is there, for people to follow you and the things that you're doing in cyber and IT, would you prefer LinkedIn for people to connect to you, or is there like a Twitter, or what do you prefer that people follow you?
Well, my Twitter's kind of pathetic. I mean, at
No
most,
worries.
it's Twitter is frankly making fun of the acolyte these days.
Yeah.
But normally, I would say LinkedIn is the place to really follow me for my rants and stuff. And meet me. I hate to sound like a broken record, but meet me at CruiseCon because that's a good place. And then I'm speaking at, I don't know when this is going to air, but in the next few months, I'm going to be at InfoSec World, ISC Squared Security Congress, an event in LA, another event in Orlando, um, Black Hat Middle East in Riyadh. I'll be there.
Nice.
I'll be in South Florida at the B-Side South Florida event that I think is November 8th, and a couple others, before CruiseCon. Oh yeah, and
Okay.
also Cybersecurity Marketing Society annual conference on December 10th.
Nice. Well, what I'll do is I'll definitely going to put the link to CruiseCon, link to the books that Ira's talked about, and any other links that Ira sends me. I will gladly have them in the description below. So, Ira, thank you so much for your time today. You've been tremendous. So, before I leave though, there was something else I want to come back to, and it's it's the one. If you had to boil everything down across your career, the books you've written, what is the one message that you want to leave someone watching this right now that they could take not only into their job, because we talked a lot about protecting data and organizations, but a lot of these people got to worry about themselves being hacked, their identities being stolen, and having their machines bricked by
Mhm.
ransomware, malware, etc. What's the one singular piece of advice that you would give to everybody, no matter who they are, what level in the company, or what they do? What would be that one piece of advice?
I'm not going to give one piece of advice. I'll give you two or three.
I love it.
First
Thank
is
you.
first is ethics is what you do when nobody's
I was looking.
looking. I want people to remember that because it's sometimes easy to do. Like I mentioned, those bosses that drove me away. I remember one time where I was working a investigation. Somebody was robbing a bank. And I found something on a Friday afternoon. I called my company manager. The guy was at Disney World with his family, and I tell him, hey, there's another system that we found that's been compromised, and he's like, okay, I'll let them know. Hang up. Monday comes around, get on the phone Monday. The head investigator from the bank calls up, says, okay, what's the status? What's going on? Give her the status. And then along the way, I go, so did you look into that other system I mentioned? They're like, what other system? And I'm like, and then she's like, when did you know this? And I could either lie to the client or I could be royally fucked, and there's no polite way. So I basically was royally fucked because I was not going to lie to the client. So, there's that, and there's like never stop learning, I will say, is critical. And try not to be an asshole to people. Not that I'm successful at that all the time, but I mean, there's a concept where, and I have a friend, just for example, you mentioned networking. There's a guy I know who was CISO he came up with this concept of previously important person. He was the CISO of the IRS, and as CISO of the IRS, he had vendors and everyone else sucking up to him in every way you could theoretically imagine. Then, when he left the job and not was a CISO anymore for a short period of time, he could not get invited to a local dinner anymore. He went back in
And
and
hurt the
got another,
ego.
yeah, he went back in, but don't treat people like anyone is a previously important person. The person I know, the reason I'm successful in my career is to the extent I have the time, I try to engage with everyone I can. And these people end up saying, oh, you mentored me. I'm like, I didn't mentor you. I just spoke to you for 5 minutes, you know? And those are people who are now CISOs, directors, bringing me into different work, reading my books, promoting me, and all that. And you can never get, you just have to understand there's no such thing as an unimportant person.
I like it. Well, thank you again, Ira, so much for joining us today on this podcast. Please check out the links below. Check out CruiseCon. Go to the website, cruisecon.com. It's a single track agenda, lots of top voices that's going to be on this boat, and you get to go to the Bahamas and the Mexican Riviera. So, what can you not like about this? And it's at a super low cost because you think of cruises cost thousands and thousands of dollars anyway, and you're getting the added benefit of the networking and the one-on-one that you're going to get. So check out cruisecon.com. And again, Ira, thank you so much.
Thank you.